So because of Joe Biden's failed economic war on Russia that I covered last night, talked about it in regards to him visiting Saudi Arabia, but earlier, I think like last month sometime, um, a U.S. envoy actually went to Venezuela to go beg Maduro for oil, and I'm going to get into all of the history with the sanctions of Venezuela, but they offered to lift sanctions and all type of manners. I actually think they did lift some of the sanctions because they're allowing. Notice the terminology. They're allowing Venezuela to ship oil over to Europe. They're allowing them to now. You see how that works? The rules based order, as United States likes to call it. But yeah, they're on their knees begging everybody that they call a despotic, everybody they call a regime. They're going to beg them for fucking oil because Biden's economic war has failed. But it's also interesting because in the article I'm going to show you guys later, they talk about how they did this, against Venezuela. It just so happened that, well, not even just so happened, the fact of the matter is that Russia's not Venezuela. And there's no disrespect to Venezuela, but Russia is one of the three superpowers in the world, which is the United States, China, and Russia. The other two, the other two are China and the United States, but to make the three, it's the United States, China, and Russia. And historically, China and Russia, usually didn't fuck with each other, especially during like the Soviet era and things like that. You had the cult of personality with Stalin and Mao, so they was kind of beef and they didn't really fuck with each other. They disagreed on how to go forth with communism and all. It's a whole nother story. But historically they've had beefs and shit like that. But now, because of how the United States has been, how they've been operating in the unipolar world that existed post the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States has pushed them together and is now moving the world towards a or a multipolar world. So unipolarism is, one dominant superpower running shit in the world, and obviously, multipolar is multiple countries running shit, and that is what we're moving towards. We were moving towards it slowly, but now because of the whole Ukraine situation, we're moving at it at hyper speeds. It's funny to see. It's like literally you thought you were going to smack Russia, but you ended up smacking yourself. Congratulations, you played yourself. Um, but yeah, very fascinating stuff, man. But let's go ahead and get into this article. I got it opened up. Let's go ahead and get into it. So, as I said, they were going out begging people for oil. U.S. reaches out to Venezuela amid possible Russia oil embargo, which they're now doing. This is from earlier. The impetus for a risky outreach to Maduro took on added urgency following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, ensuing U.S. sanctions and a possible ban on Russian oil and gas. And as I said, that actually came into fruition. And like I said, it's very fascinating that they recognize they reach out to the actual president. So we're going to get to this later, but for the last like 4 or 5 years since 2017, basically, they've been recognizing this guy Juan Guaido, who nobody in Venezuela knew of prior to this. Like they were recognizing him as the actual president of the United States because of some bullshit legality stuff that Guaido and his people were pulled out their ass. They were making this argument that he's the rightful president of Venezuela and shit like that. It's insanity, but the United States is recognized him. So imagine if Venezuela didn't recognize Joe Biden as president, and they were just moving accordingly. Or imagine China or Russia were doing that. They're like, nope, Joe Biden is not the president. The Rock is. We recognize Dwayne Johnson as president. Like, how fucking insane would that be? Like, the United States wouldn't tolerate that shit, right? It's basically what they're doing in Venezuela. And they do the same thing in these other countries as well. Like, they like to say Syria's elections are rigged. They don't recognize it. Same thing with Iran. These places don't have democracies, blah, blah, blah. And it's very interesting because Caleb Maupin did this video that I might actually talk about. I'm trying to find a way to break it down and not make it long. Like, I might do a stream where it's just about that video where we watch it together and I just give my thoughts and opinions on it. But one of the things he talked about was how, they say that places and he used Iran, for example, how they have like a what is it called? A council of like religious people that basically decide who can and can't run, and they say that that's an undemocratic process. Okay, fine, you can say that, you can make that argument, but Caleb's argument was that the United States has the same thing, but the only difference is it's not the religious leaders and clerics in the country that decides it. It's the fucking banks and corporations that decide. Like people people either don't know or forget that Kamala Harris went up to the Hamptons, to swoon all the donor class, on the Democratic side of the party, to basically put them to put all their weight behind her. But unfortunately, they did not account for how unpopular Shorty would be, and the fact that Tulsi Gabbard would yeet her out of here. Tulsi Gabbard, of all people, who Tulsi Gabbard got more votes than Kamala Harris. Just think about that. And there's things I like about Tulsi now, but give Tulsi her credit, man. She got Kamala the fuck out of here. It was beautiful to watch it. But yeah. So and Caleb makes the point that they like to call all like Iran undemocratic for that reason, where it's like at least their government actually tries to act on behalf of their people. Our government is literally, our leaders are picked by banks and corporations and the wealthy. That's just the fact of the matter. So very fascinating, when it comes down to that, to Venezuela. But like I said, like the fact that now, like, you sure you don't want to go talk to Juan Guaido about that oil, huh? You sure you don't want to go talk to that guy? Yeah, that's what I thought. So, but amidst all this, and this is where I say, Biden is going full Romney. you never go full Romney. Yeah. Remember that? Remember Tropic Thunder? He was like, never go full retard. You never go full Romney. Oh, bro, can't make up his fucking mind. I call it the Romney effect, like I said. So, U.S. bars Cuba. So this is at the Summit of the Americas. I did a stream about that as well. Biden basically banned Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, from coming, and in retaliation to that, a lot of countries didn't show. I think it was Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico, and like another country. I think I'm drawing a blank on it, but other countries didn't show up as a form of protest or retaliation, and solidarity with their fellow American countries. And but yeah, so U.S. bars Cuba. This is from Reuters, written by Matt Spitalnik and Dave Graham. U.S. bars Cuba, Venezuela from America's summit. Mexican leaders sit out. Decision to cut out Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua followed weeks of intense deliberations and was due to concerns about human rights and a lack of democracy in the three nations, a senior official said, as Joe Biden is about to go give Saudi Arabia the Gok 3000 for oil. Wow. United States Department spokesperson Ned Price. This is the guy that got sauced by that one journalist when they were talking about Russia invading Ukraine. Now, one of the things they talk about that as well, I want to bring that up. One of the things they don't talk about on there is the fact that they kept saying, like, the United States kept saying for weeks, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. Like, weeks kept going by, and Russia didn't invade Ukraine. But it got to the point, and Russia wasn't planning on doing so, but Ukraine started staging an offensive in the Donetsk republics, once again violating the Minsk II agreements. And Russia was like, all right, fuck it, man. Nah, fuck that. If y'all not going to abide by the agreements that we made, fuck it. We're not going to abide by that shit. And that's when they went into Ukraine. Nobody ever talks about that, though. They never talk about the fact that the Azov battalions and the other Nazi regiments, the other Nazi-led regiments, were about to do another incursion, another shelling campaign into the Donetsk regions or the Donbass regions. Nobody talks about that shit. But regardless, but Ned Price, he got sauced by a journalist. I forgot where I think the journalist was from the Associated Press. Now, this same journalist has sauced this motherfucker 3 or 4 times. Like, bro, you can't just come up here and say shit. So basically, he was like, Ned Price's whole thing was, Russia's going to invade Ukraine because we said so. And the journalist is like, bro, that's not evidence. Like you can't just come up here and say, trust me, bro. Nah, you gotta say something. And it turns out that they actually didn't have evidence. They were actually creating the evidence. So that's why they didn't have it at the time, because they were telling their little stooges in Ukraine, hey, doing an incursion into the Donbass regions to egg Russia on, because they knew what the reaction was going to be. Like I said, go read the Niet Means Net memo from William Burns, and that will describe exactly what you saw go down with that conflict. But yeah, so US, that's Ned Price, who got sauced by a journalist. He was just floundering up there on the podium. It was fucking hilarious to see. arguing back and forth with the guy. It was fucking hilarious. It was beautiful. But U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the Biden administration understands Mexico's position, but one of the key elements of this summit is democratic governance, and these countries are not exemplars, to put it mildly. Democratic governments. Goldman Sachs, has never lost a fucking election, and you guys want to talk about democratic governance? Like literally, there's like multiple studies out there that effectively say the United States is a fucking oligarchy. Oh, it does not represent the people. Last time I checked, democracy was representing the people. And then you'll have the other people say, oh, well, this is a republic. All right, fine. Either way, it's fuck the people. And then Rich Goldman Sachs and Raytheon and all of the the whole oil cartel and banking cartels. That's what it is. Again, they gave the richest people in the country $14 trillion and gave you a fuck you $2,000 check, and now are circling around trying to blame that as the reason why we're experiencing inflation. And there's Americans that buy it. It's so funny. I know this has nothing to do with that, but that was just on my mind. So funny how they can convince Americans of anything with their pseudo economics. It amazes me every day. Biden aides have been mindful of pressure from Republicans and some fellow Democrats against appearing soft on America's three main leftist antagonists in Latin America. Miami's large Cuban American community, which favored Trump's harsh policies toward Cuba and Venezuela, is seen as an important voting bloc in Florida that you're not going to get. um, in the November elections that will decide control of the U.S. Congress, which is now in the hands of the Democrats. Again, they're not going to do shit for these people aren't going to vote for you. It's not going to happen. And you're basing they're not basing it because of those people. They're basing it because it serves the interest of the ruling class, the people who bought Joe Biden, the people who have their hand up Joe Biden's ass and is doing this. Those are the people that are making these decisions for monetary reasons, of course, for imperialist reasons. They like to call Russia imperialist, but that's bullshit. United States is the OG of imperialism, bro. Okay, so it's hilarious to see Democrats are aligning with war hawk Republicans. That's literally what they just said in this article where Reuters just said. That's literally what they just said. It's so crazy. And it's like I said, these Cubans, I'm sure some of these people have stories and you feel bad for them and things like that. But I don't know if I can feel sympathy for you if you're in favor of starving your own people. You're in favor of sanctions that hurt and starve your fucking people. It's fucking like that. I don't see that as, a thing. My dog is barking right now. Yeah, but yeah, it's very it's crazy. There was even the Miami the Miami mayor was literally saying we should bomb Cuba. We should do missile strikes in Cuba. Fucking insanity. Um, but yeah, so Democrats agree with Congress on imperialism. Who would have known? Having rolled out Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the Biden administration expects representatives for opposition leader Juan Guaido will attend. He actually didn't. I'm going to get into that. Price said he declined to say whether their participation will be in person or virtually. The senior administration official asked whether Biden might have a call with Guaido during the summit, said there was a good chance of an engagement, but declined to elaborate. Washington recognizes Guaido as Venezuela's legitimate president, having condemned Maduro's 2018 re-election as a sham, but some countries in the region have stuck with Maduro. Now, the crazy part about that is that Venezuela had their elections, right? And in order for the opposition, because they did the same thing in the previous election, they basically sound like a lot of the Trump people. The election was stolen, all that bullshit. But they tried to be more inclusive. Hey, how about you guys, come to political debate thing, because they have basically what we call town halls where people of all political walks and stripes come and air their grievances with the president. Literally, I've seen video footage of it where even people that don't fuck with the president go and air their grievances. And it's they decided not to do that because they think he's a sham. He's not the real president, and they didn't partake in it. and they lost because they told their people not to go. It's like I said, it's very similar to what Trump did. Like, could there like I've seen evidence like presented by people. I'm not going to say it exactly because they'll yank this stream off of YouTube, but you know what I'm saying. Evidence of shenanigans and what. But like overall, like there are a lot of other factors that contributed to Trump losing as well. Things he did while in office politically, and also like the fact that he was telling his people not to vote, not to do the mail-in voting. So, and like with the mail-in voting stuff, I'm more like, all right, we were going through a pandemic, this, that, and the third. Although I think a lot of the things with what was bullshit with the pandemic was bullshit, but people were afraid to go out and vote. So what do you do in that situation? You should do mail-in voting, but instead of trying to get rid of mail-in voting, how about we like make mail-in voting more secure? Like in a lot of these Latin American countries, you literally have to like show your fingerprint. Why don't you have like officials go out to people to cast their votes? Proper officials. There's so many things that we could be talking about, but people just want to have these arbitrary arguments that go nowhere, and debates and everything that don't offer any real solutions. So nothing ever changes here in the United States on both sides. Both sides they don't want the system to change because like there's no voting here in America. You're not going to beat Goldman Sachs. It doesn't matter if you vote for Trump or Biden. You're not beating Goldman Sachs. You're not beating Raytheon. That's just a fact of the matter. They've never lost an election. Sorry to break that to you if you didn't know that. Sorry to tell you that. But yeah, so they tried to be more inclusive of the elections, and they literally told their people not to go vote. Literally. And then he walks out and declares himself as president because he said it was a sham. It's like complete bullshit. But and the fact that they did that, and you still have people saying certain oh, Maduro's not the legit president. It's like, just fuck off, man, fuck off. But we're going to get back into Guaido in a minute, but this is what Blinky Antony with Tony Blinken had to say about it, and this is what he had to say. And now this is from the Los Angeles Times. But the notions that some countries are not here, I would dispute. They're not here. Blinken said, noting that dissidents, artists, and members of civil, notice how he puts in there, members of civil society. So, like, the millions of people who voted for Maduro aren't civil people. And no, there's people that back Maduro that don't, like, they have issues with his governance, but they see, like, how the United States is interfering in their internal affairs, and they're like, fuck that, I'm going to stand behind this nigga because fuck the United States. You see the same effect in Syria, and they like you have even independent media, which TYT isn't really independent media, but other independent outlets that say, oh, this election was a sham with Assad and things like that, and with Maduro. When you do these things in these countries, you like rally around, like people rally around their country. People are in other countries, people are very patriotic. I know here in America, the Western left has made patriotism and things like that, and they've turned it into a dirty word, but they don't acknowledge how in a lot of these communist and socialist countries, and I say this all the time, a lot of these most Western leftists, like, they only want socialism in their mind, and they only want communism and Marxism in their mind. They don't actually adhere to the concept of materialism that is the backbone, dialectical materialism that is the backbone of Marxist, socialist, and communist ideology. But like, they basically only see it in their minds and shit like that. Like, it's like an identity politics utopia and shit like that, where gay, trans people, and black people can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and we could, cancel out of existence the dirty, evil, racist, conservatives and things like that, not realizing that a lot of the people, like black people, are actually very conservative. But regardless, like, they only want socialism in their minds. They don't actually when it's like they condemn and shit on countries that are actually actively doing it and have had successes until American imperialism interfered and sabotage interfered. And it's like, a lot of these people in these countries are very patriotic. They're very, nationalistic, not in a bad way. They're very religious, deeply religious, like, and nobody talks about this. It's crazy. But yeah, so notice how he says civil society as if like Venezuelans, like Maduro's and civil, and people who support Maduro. Like, you're literally saying millions of people aren't still like civil, and it's a race aspect that goes into Venezuela as well. A lot of the people that support Maduro are the darker skinned Venezuelans, and it's literally Juan Guaido represents the more fairer skinned Venezuelans and shit like that. It's a race element that's going on there as well, along with the political element as well. So it's a concoction, that is toxic when you get the United States and it's fuckery involved. So, but I just wanted to note what he said there, civil society. But though they have next to no power in their country, so he's talking about the civil society from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are attending, though they have next to no power in their countries. I would argue they are more represented. They are more representative of their respective countries than the regimes that happen to be in place in that right now. Wow. Like I said, imagine China saying that about the Biden administration and see what the United States would have to say about it. Even people that don't like Biden, like military people, they're still very of that John Wayne ilk. Like, I didn't vote for him, but he's my president. They would have issues if China wouldn't recognize Biden or Trump or the current president of the United States as the president. Like, they would have a problem with that. Oh, and the fact that the United States just walks around all willy nilly doing it is fucking utter, blows my mind. But that's the arrogance of the West. That's the arrogance. They think they can just walk around. This is the rules based order. You do what we say, or we're going to sanction and starve your people. Fuck you. So Blinken also used the summit to stress concern about freedom of the press. Notice I just did the Assange story. This is rich. I had to put this in here. But Blinken also used the summit to stress concern about freedom of the press in a region where journalists are often killed, threatened, or sued into silence, and acknowledge that it's often the leaders of those countries who bear responsibility. Gray Zone just got through a lawsuit with some chick who her family were ex-Iranians. They gave all of, so they back in like when Iran had its uprising and they overthrew the Shah of Iran. The United States sanctioned and basically stole like billions of dollars of their money. Well, they gave this woman that the Gray Zone went to court with, they gave her family millions of dollars. This chick squandered it on like cocaine, drugs, like the party girl lifestyle and shit like that. And she became like a journalist or some shit like that. And basically, like, she took Max and at the time Ben Norton. I have my issues with Ben Norton, but at the time she took them to court, over some bullshit. So they do that here in America, and there's no doubt that she was influenced, not necessarily, I'm not saying directly by the intelligence community, but definitely by people who surround, their little media puppets and poodles and shit like that. Um, like I said, you see what they're doing to Assange right now, as I covered. You see what they're doing to Daniel Hill. Like, again, this is the arrogance and hypocrisy of the West. They do it all the fucking time. So yeah, and continuing with the article, and acknowledge that it's often the leaders of those countries who bear responsibility. The U.S. goal, Blinken said, is to boost watchdog organizations that advocate for journalist safety and to pressure government leaders on the issue. We are first and foremost, so again, imposing how you see the world on other people. This is why countries would rather work for China, along with China, and build coalitions with China and Russia, because Russia and China don't impose their view of the world on other countries. It's oh my god, just the sheer arrogance. It's like, ugh. We are first and foremost trying to put a spotlight on this, and second, engaging directly with governments about the need to take actions to protect journalists, Blinken said. We see governments around the world using so-called legal tools to actually put free press out of business. This is literally what they're doing. That they literally did this to WikiLeaks. So before Assange, the whole Assange case, was going down the way it is now, they literally seized WikiLeaks funds. They pressured PayPal and all these other pay outlets to like ban WikiLeaks, so they couldn't receive donations. So WikiLeaks started doing like cryptocurrencies for donations and shit. Like they do the same shit. This is the same shit they do. It's fucking crazy. To put actual free press out of business, especially independent media. And there's another story that Max Blumenthal exposed. That there's this guy, I think his name's like Paul Mason or some shit. He's like a male AOC in like Britain and shit like that. Like, this motherfucker was about to use the UK state to go after the Gray Zone, doing exactly what they're describing here. It's fucking insanity. This is why I'm like, the hypocrisy is just it's nauseating. But especially independent media, for example, with lawsuits designed to make them go bankrupt, Blinken said, we put in place funds that journalists can draw on and media enterprises can draw on in order to be able to defend themselves against these kinds of prosecutions. And this is so you're literally doing what they accuse China of doing with outlets like Gray Zone, WikiLeaks, and all, like, oh, they're propaganda outlets of Russia. You're literally doing that. You're literally, he just said it. We fund journalistic outlets, independent outlets that are that oppose the government. You're basically doing propaganda. You're doing the Radio Free Asia and Radio Free Europe bullshit, but you're doing it through these regular people. He's admitting to it right now. Again, imagine if China were funding a journalistic outlet here in the fucking United States. I know a lot of you dipshits, you Trump people, believe that that's the New York Times and all these other outlets. It's fucking hilarious when they say, oh, China is okay. But imagine if China or Russia or Iran was doing this here in the United States would be fucking livid. They would be fucking livid and pushing, people to go overthrow their government and shit. Like, they would be livid. They would consider it an act of war. Depending on the country, they would actually go to war with them. So, we're going to go ahead and get into the history of the sanctions in Venezuela. So let's go ahead and get into it. Sanctions of mass destruction: America's war on Venezuela. This is written by Garaki Chengu. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I hope I pronounced it right. The fact that for America, the issue in Venezuela is oil, not democracy, will surprise only those who watch the news and ignore history. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves on the planet, more than Saudi Arabia. So that's why I knew the United States had to bring freedom and democracy to Venezuela. Once I found out they had the most oil in the world, I was like, yep, they definitely got to bring liberty to their people. So again, this is what the United States do. They're not there to protect freedom rights. They're there to steal their fucking natural resources. America seeks control of Venezuela because it sits atop the strategic intersection of the Caribbean, South and Central American worlds. Control of the nation has always been a remarkably effective way to project power into these three regions and beyond. From the first moment Hugo Chavez took office, the United States has been trying to overthrow Venezuela's socialist movement by using sanctions, coup attempts, and funding the opposition parties. After all, there's nothing more undemocratic than a coup d'etat. United States, they actually did this in Venezuela. So the United States, I think it was like the Marines or somebody, literally went into Venezuela, kidnapped Hugo Chavez, and took him to some undisclosed location. And then, like, the Venezuelan, this puppet regime of the United States stepped in and said, we're the acting government now. And the Venezuelan people rioted to the point Maduro was actually in these riots. There's actually like video of Maduro like out there like protesting and shit like that and giving speeches and but the people were rioting and they had to bring Hugo Chavez back because it was destabilizing the country and they had to bring him back. So they actually did do this. This was literally Bush was like, he came out and gave a speech, was like, yeah, he resigned and just walked away. Like, yeah, nigga, I'm pretty sure he didn't. But like, Marines kidnapped him. Pretty sure he didn't resign, but regardless. United Nations Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Alfred de Zayas recommended just a few days ago that the International Criminal Court investigate economic sanctions against Venezuela as a possible crime against humanity perpetrated by America. Now, the ICC was trying to do this with America in regards to Iran and its criminal sanctions. They were sanctioning medical supplies and food, which is illegal under international law. And the United States said, yeah, go fuck yourself. You and what army is going to stop us and do something about it? It said, go fuck yourself. Over the past 5 years, American sanctions have cut Venezuela off from most financial markets, which have caused local oil production to plummet. So that's because of the sanctions. I'm going to get into more of why this is going on. It's very more insidious, and it's going to tie into what I was talking about at the top of this segment. But consequently, Venezuela has experienced the largest decline in living standards of any country in recorded Latin American history. Prior to American sanctions, socialism in Venezuela had reduced inequality and poverty whilst pensions expanded. During the same time period in America, it has been an absolute reverse. President Chavez funneled Venezuela's oil reserves into social spending as a free plus 6 healthcare, education, subsidized food networks, and housing construction. Now, I actually have this video. I'm not going to have time to go and find it and shit like that because it's like buried deep in my archive. Like it's going to take me too long to find it. But there's actual video of like they're like and RT reported this a while ago. This is years ago, but this is when Obama was like for his first term. But and this is when Chavez was still alive and in power. He was sending oil to poor people here in America. This was during the during the recession. They were sending Venezuela was sending oil here to poor Americans who couldn't afford their gas bills and shit like that. They were sending them oil or fossil fuels here for free so they could heat people's houses. Like this, it was this old, this old lady, this old white woman who was like, I don't care what his politics are. Like he, out of the graciousness of his heart, helped us, reached out to us when our own government wasn't fucking doing that. And Chavez rubbed it in Obama's face. He was like, I'm very disappointed in Obama, the first black president, letting his people freeze in the way. Oh my God, it was crazy. But this is what they do in Venezuela and this is why they don't like it. Like this is why they overthrew Mossadegh in Iran originally in 1953. They did a coup in Iran. He nationalized the oil reserves. He told BP, the gas BP. Yeah, he told them to go kick rocks. We're going to give the profits of our oil to our people, the fund social programs like Chavez was doing, and they said, yeah, fuck that, and staged the coup. That's why they don't like Chavez. Okay, that's why they don't like him. In order to fully understand why America is waging economic war on the people of Venezuela, one must analyze the historical relationship between the petrodollar system and sanctions of mass destruction. Prior to the 20th century, the value of money was tied to gold. When banks lent money, they were constrained by the size of their gold reserves. But in 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon took the country off the gold standard. Nixon and Saudi Arabia came to an oil for dollars agreement that would change the course of history and became the root cause of countless wars for oil. Under this petrodollar agreement, the only currency that Saudi Arabia could sell its oil in was the U.S. dollar, and that's what props our dollar up and why Joe Biden is over there giving Saudi Arabia the gawk 3,000 as they're talking about possibly taking the yuan now. The Saudi under this petrodollar agreement, the only currency that Saudi Arabia could sell its oil in was in U.S. dollars. The Saudi kingdom would in turn ensure that its oil profits flow back in the U.S. government treasuries and American banks. In exchange, America pledged to provide the Saudi royal family's regime with military power, protection, and military hardware. It was the start of something truly great for America. Access to oil defined 20th century empires, and the petrodollar agreement was the key to the ascendancy of the United States as the world's sole superpower. America's war machine runs on, is funded by, and exists in protection of oil. Threats by any nation to undermine the petrodollar system are viewed by Washington as tantamount to a declaration of war against the United States of America. Within the last 2 decades, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Venezuela have all threatened to sell their oil in other currencies. Consequently, they have all been subject to crippling U.S. sanctions. Sound familiar? Remember yesterday when I was talking about how Russia, now they did it in retaliation to economic sanctions because they're like, fuck it, man. The West continuously sanctions us. They hold this military posture towards this aggressive, hostile posture to us via NATO. We're just going to start cutting ourselves off from the West. So now Europe, you get most of your fossil fuels from us. If you want to continue to get those fossil fuels, you're going to pay for it in rubles. And don't worry, even if you want to be a dickhead and send it to us in euros, we're going to take your fucking euros, like I explained in the video yesterday, but I'll explain it again. We're going to take your fucking euros, convert it for you from the euro to the ruble, and we're going to use it to pay for your oil and send you your oil. You'll get your oil if you send those euros, and we convert it for you and go on your merry way. And it's going to prop our currency up, our ruble up. It's fucking genius. It's brilliant, honestly. It's brilliant. And in return, it's inflating the price of oil right now, which is why gas prices are going up. So literally, Joe Biden and the West are sanctioning their own fucking people. Essentially, that's what they're doing. Now, some people would say, oh, that's incompetence. I would say that's by design because they're trying to usher in all this like green energy, Green New Deal bullshit. And people who watch my channel know I used to be a proponent of the Green New Deal, not so much anymore. So I'm gonna do a stream about that next Saturday probably. But yeah. So all those countries, you see the picture of why they shit on these countries now, right? While standing arm in arm with regimes like Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all these other these fucking despot fascistic countries. So yeah. Over time, the petrodollar system spread beyond oil, and the US dollar slowly but surely became the reserve currency for global trades in most commodities and goods. This system allows America to maintain its position of dominance as the world's only superpower, despite being a staggering $23 trillion in debt. With billions of dollars worth of minerals in the ground and with the world's largest oil reserves, Venezuela should not only be wealthy, but her people the envy of the developing world. But the nation is essentially broke because American sanctions have cut them off from the international financial system and cost the economy $6 billion over the last 5 years. Now, again, so when you hear people say, oh, socialism and communism hasn't worked anywhere it goes, this is why. Because every time they get something going, and things are the quality of life starts improving for these people, the United States steps in and starts fucking with it and fucking it up. But once people never talk about that, it's utter insanity. It's utter lunacy. Venezuela could recover easily. Hang on 1 second, guys. That's my guest hit me up. By collateralizing some of its abundant resources or its $8 billion of gold reserves in order to get the loans necessary to kickstart their economy. Now, the problem with that is, so as he talked about, or it's 8 billion of gold reserves that it has. So this article was written before this happened. The United Kingdom, where Venezuela has, stored its gold, I would say that's a mistake that they made. But in these European banks where they store their gold, the United Kingdom seized their gold. They seized it. They took it. So now they can't even do that. What this guy just said, they can't even do that because they seized and stole their fucking gold. You see how they fucking do? This is why, a lot of countries are starting to move away from Western institutions because they wield the monetary institutions as a weapon against countries that they don't like, countries that won't be subservient. That is what Russia is doing. That is what China is doing. That is what all of these countries are doing. And the West is only fucking themselves over by doing that, by the way. The only people that are fucking over is themselves. Over the last 5 years, sanctions have caused Venezuelan per capita incomes to drop by 40%, which is a decline similar to that of what? War-torn Iraq and Syria. At the height of their armed conflicts, millions of Venezuelans had to flee the country. If America is so concerned about refugees, Trump should stop furthering disastrous policies that actually create them. Under Chavez, Venezuela had a policy of welcoming refugees. President Chavez turned Venezuela into the wealthiest society in Latin America with the best income equality. In September 2017, Maduro made good on Chavez's promise to list oil sales in yuan rather than the US dollar. Weeks later, Trump signed a round of crippling sanctions on the people of Venezuela. There you have it. So, going into sanctions, going all the way back to Obama, deeply concerned Obama imposes sanctions on Venezuelan officials. The White House places sanctions on 7 individuals and expresses grave worries about the Venezuelan government's treatment of political opponents. So this was before Trump, obviously, because Obama was in office. Then Trump came and did even harsher sentences. Now, this is where I say it gets interesting and it ties in even more. Like that article like explained it very well, but this article just like straight up in your face tells you what it is. This is actually, I think it's called the Oil Times. I pulled this article from. But did the Saudis in the U.S. collude in dropping oil prices? Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure our guests. All right, let me get through this segment. Did the Saudis in the U.S. collude in dropping oil prices? Now, this is by Andrew Tomf, and this is from December 2014. The oil price the oil price drop that has dominated the headlines in recent weeks has been framed almost exclusively in terms of oil market economics, with most media outlets blaming Saudi Arabia through its OPEC Trojan horse for driving down the price, thus causing serious damage to the world's major oil exporters, most notably Russia. This is back in 2014. While the market explanation is partially true, it is simplistic and fails to address key geopolitical pressure points in the Middle East. And it's from oil. Yeah, it's called oilprice.com, guys. Oilprice.com looked into the headlines for the reason behind the oil price drop and found that the explanation, while difficult to prove, may revolve around control of oil and gas in the Middle East and the weakening of Russia, Iran, and Syria by flooding the market with cheap oil, and also Syria or Venezuela. You can add Venezuela to that list as well. Saudis and other OPEC members have, of course, used the oil price for the adverse effect that is suppressing production to keep prices artificially high and member states swimming in petrodollars. In 2008, oil peaked at $147 a barrel. So they do the adverse when it benefits them. However, analysis shows the reasoning is complex and may go beyond simply taking down the price to gain back lost market share. So they're not doing it for the reason that they just said previously. Why are they doing it? What is the reason for the United States and some allies wanting to drive down the price of oil? Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro asked rhetorically in October to harm Russia. That's what he said, but also to harm them. I would say to harm them as well. Many believe the oil price plunge is the result of deliberate and well-planned collusion on the part of the United States and Saudi Arabia to punish Russia and Iran for supporting the murderous Assad regime in Syria. But again, I think one of those targets was also Venezuela that they're not talking about as well, because in tandem with doing this, Barack Obama slapped these sanctions on them as well. Very this is great stuff here. Now we're going to move into that's okay. We're going to move into a couple of days. We're going to talk about Juan Guaido now. We're going to talk about Juan Guaido, which is going to be fucking hilarious because that guy's a dick. But let's go ahead and get into that. Let's go ahead and move into that real quick. Let me pull it up. So going back to Juan Guaido, the very interesting thing about this guy is that, like I said, they still. One second. They still recognize Juan Guaido as the president, even as they're on their knees begging Maduro. They're not exactly giving Maduro the Gok 3000. They're definitely on their knees begging him for some fucking oil. But they're still recognizing this guy Juan Guaido as president. But the funny part about that is actually, let's go ahead and get into this not necessarily article, but this press briefing. This is a press release. Readout of President Biden's call with Venezuelan interim president Juan Guaido. So they still call him the president, the interim president. President Joseph R. Biden Jr. spoke today with Venezuelan interim president Juan Guaido to underscore the United States' recognition of and support for the 2015 democratically elected National Assembly and Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. This is insane. This is insanity. This is insanity. Biden expressed his support for Venezuelan-led negotiations as the best path forward to a peaceful restoration of democratic institutions, free and fair elections, and respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all Venezuelans. They discussed the role the United States and other international partners can play in supporting a negotiated solution to Venezuela's crisis. I can tell you the solution. Leave their country the fuck alone and lift the sanctions. Same thing with Cuba, same thing with Nicaragua, same thing with all of these countries. Leave them the fuck alone. Lift sanctions, go the fuck away. The Medhurst doctrine. Mind your fucking business. That's the solution. President Biden reaffirmed the United States is willing to calibrate sanctions policies as informed by the outcomes of negotiations that empower the Venezuelan people to determine the future of their country. So basically saying, we need that oil right now, so you guys need to fuck up. They didn't even invite this guy to the Summit of the Americas because they didn't want to push too far on Maduro to push him away, basically. It's fucking hilarious. They're like dancing this tightrope, and it's fucking hilarious to watch. So they're still recognizing that guy as president. And here are two videos I'm going to show you real quick. How do I do this? How do I do this? Yeah, so again, this is during the election. So like I said, during the election, they told their people not to go out and vote. So since you told your people not to go out and vote, your party, like, even though like this guy, he like Maduro won, it was still by like a razor thread, I believe. But you told your people not to go out and vote. And the other parties went out and voted. The opposition parties that aren't aligned with Juan Guaido went out and voted, but they didn't. His faction didn't go out and vote. So he just, like, after telling his people not to go vote, and obviously they lost. This is what he went out and declared himself president. So I believe they were calling him like a motherfucker there in Spanish or something like that. I don't know if that's exactly what they were doing, but at one point, Juan Guaido himself was calling Maduro a motherfucker in the town square, and they were still having rallies after this. This guy still walks around in public. So let me ask you this: if Maduro is a dictator, like they say he is, what dictator allows his opposition to do this? Please explain to me, please. Look at this.
Juro asumir formalmente las competencias del Ejecutivo Nacional.
Again, this guy's not the president.
Como el presidente encargado
And he's swearing himself in as president. This is like me saying, like, as a rapper, this is like me saying, hey, I didn't get nominated for a Grammy, but I'm just going to show up to the Grammys as if I did. And expected him to let me in.
Un gobierno de transición y tener elecciones libres. Si así lo hiciere, que Dios y la paz te lo premien, sino que os condenen.
Bro, this is nuts. Like, I've never seen shit like this before.
Ante Dios.
Never seen shit like this before. So he goes out and declares himself the president. And let's actually get into this Abby Martin video too, because she breaks a little bit of the situation down as well. You know, Abby Martin is somebody else. You know, I've had, you know, not complaints about or anything like that, but like some of the thing, her COVID stances and everything I don't agree with, but her foreign policy is on point for the most part. Let's go ahead and get into that as she breaks this down.
Venezuela firsthand made me realize how much the media is lying to us about the reality on the ground. The U.S. government and its propaganda arms say it's a dictatorship where mass famine and civil unrest demands U.S. intervention. They deliberately don't tell you key facts. An economic war being waged inside by private businesses and outside of the country by crushing U.S. sanctions.
So again, like I said, in tandem with Saudi Arabia purposely driving down oil prices to neglect people from going to buy it, it was a direct attack on Russia first and foremost. They were going after Russia, but I also think this was in tandem with Venezuela because, like I said, as soon as I learned that Venezuela had the largest oil reserves in the fucking world, I knew we had to go bring freedom and fucking democracy to their fucking people. As soon as I knew that, I was like, that's why we're there. Like, I don't know why people don't get this through their fucking heads. The United States doesn't fucking care about freedom and democracy. They don't give a shit. All they care about is oil because they're all bought by the fucking oil companies, which is why they're letting Chevron go in there and drill now because we're having energy crisis. And that's why he's going to Saudi Arabia to suck the crown prince's dick to get some fucking oil. That's what's going on.
Trump's sanctions have debilitated the Venezuelan economy, costing them $6 billion just in the last year. And sanctions do exactly as they're intended to do, by hitting the poor and working class people the hardest. Their strategy is to starve the people into submission, then cynically use that humanitarian crisis as the premise for more intervention. They say that millions of people are demanding the ouster of Maduro. What they deliberately don't show you are the millions who support Maduro, who voted for him, who are also in the streets protesting this criminal coup attempt. They say that a coup is democracy, that Guaido is restoring the Constitution by declaring himself president in a country that just held a presidential election last year. We've seen this propaganda playbook before, from Latin America to the Middle East, and it's literally being led by the same war criminals. John Bolton, who lied us into war with Iraq, Elliot Abrams, who facilitated a genocide in Guatemala. 1 million Iraqis died for a war based on lies, paved by the so-called free press. they're doing it again. All progressives and anti-interventionists have to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Venezuela to defend their sovereignty.
So yeah, there she breaks down the whole sanctions crisis there and everything like that. And what I also find amusing about this, Garland Nixon posted this on his what is it called? His Twitter. And so Juan Guaido is in favor of all these sanctions and shit like that. Like he's even like the United States has actually given him money from like their gold reserves and shit like that. Like they've actually given the money, the West has like $250 million or something like that, I think. So there, yeah. But this is how the Venezuelan people, feel, the actual people on the ground feel about this guy. He's supposed to be of the people and shit like that. This is how the people feel about him. So this is him at a restaurant. Like I said, this guy walks around willy-nilly, free and about. He's the opposition figure declaring himself president, and he's still allowed to walk around in this dictatorship. Make it make sense. And this is how the people feel about him. Now, I'm not advocating violence or anything like that. I'm saying this is how his people are reacting to him and his stances and his support of the sanctions and the economic war on Venezuela. This is how they feel about him. I'm not advocating this, but what I'm saying is this is how his people feel about him. Yeah. And Garland is hilarious. He said Biden's puppet in Venezuela, Juan Guaido, barely escaped with his life. The Venezuelans hate his guts. So very fascinating stuff, man. Very fascinating stuff. And I believe that's it for this one. Yeah, that's it for this one, guys. For this segment.